Good morning, everybody. Richard DeBolt, House Republican. Thanks for coming out today. We wanted to take an opportunity to talk about this week. There's a lot of issues that are going on today. We have Gary Alexander with me from the House side. Representative Alexander does our budget. He's working on getting a draft of our budget out, and he's dealing with a lot of the appropriations issues that you might have questions on. Senator Randy Becker's here. She's going to be dealing with a lot of issues over in the Senate, and she'll have a chance to speak. As you know, we have the Republican leader, Senator Schessler, myself, the Speaker Pro Tem, Senator Sheldon, and also to answer questions around transportation from our perspective is...
He did?
I did.
Oh, okay.
I did. I put right
in the Senate, though, it's President Pro Tem.
President Pro Tem, sorry. Yeah, you're not Speaker?
No.
Okay.
I wish.
So we wanted to start out, though, this week and talk a little bit about this unified coalition and what's been going on. I really wanted to take an opportunity to let you know that we're trying to do our best to work together to have a larger discussion that involves more of the caucuses in Olympia. There's a lot more bills that are moving. You know, a couple of things that came out this week from the Democrat perspective was the 10-cent gas tax, which was not only just not really a great proposal, but with some of the problems that we've seen on the floating bridge and the ferry mismanagement and some of the issues that we've had around the Department of Transportation, I think there's too many questions there, and we're going to talk about fix it before you fund it. And then also we did the mandate on abortion mandate. We passed that out over here, and we can talk about that if you want. We do have some budget negotiations that are going on, but I think the main thing is we're here to take questions. Senator Schessler?
Well, I had a little bit to that, Richard. Over in the Senate, much to the disappointment of a few, the Senate is functioning very well. There were some that I don't believe wanted to see us function well, but we are doing well.
I have the over-under for the whole session, so I'm good.
So we're moving ahead. Bills are moving. The process is functioning perfectly normal. Pointing out some things, Senator Bailey is here in the back, our higher ed chair, and she's running the committee. We've gone back to having confirmation hearings on our trustees again, giving them a real airing out before we bring them up for confirmation. Point out that Senator Padden has passed 14 of the 42 bills in his committee were from the minority caucus that he is working for him. If you were over in the Senate today, last order of consideration, 3 bills. 2 of them came from the minority caucus. So we are involving the minority caucus in all sorts of things at every level. We're functioning as we intended, and we're hoping that the House will look at taking action on first ever fund school construction first budget, workers' comp bills, things that I think make a lot of sense and pass the Senate with really strong support from both caucuses.
Senator Sheldon?
Well, I guess I would say that we're trying to stay focused on our agenda, which is jobs, education, and the budget. I can say from my perspective, as someone who has served in both caucuses in the majority, that this has been a privilege for me to serve with the other 24 members. And it is a caucus which is very diverse. It's not controlled by any one person, although any one person can make a difference, obviously, with 25. So we try to rotate our people that are up here at the front for you each week and give you some of our perspective. But from my perspective, after serving in both caucuses, I think it's doing very well. It's not controlled by one person on the top of the triangle. And we're seeing bills come through. We're seeing the minority having chances with their bills as well. And I think it's just functioning pretty well for the session. When you start out, you don't have that history of people that have been in majority for a long time. And you don't have things back in the wings that have been worked on for years and years and years. It can always take a place if something else doesn't work. So we want to keep focused, and I think we're doing that.
Report cut?
So we're working on some transportation reforms. What we want to do is we want to get some reforms and try to get controls of the costs before we start adding any additional taxes. We think it's absolutely critical. We've seen what's happened in 2003. They got higher taxes. We didn't really get any reforms. 2005, there were higher taxes. In 2006, one of the few reforms we had went away and hasn't been brought back onto the books. It's pretty clear to me that we've got to get those reforms before we do any more taxes. One of the things that I think we can and should do can be a 7 to 9.5% savings very quickly, and that's just stop charging sales tax on transportation projects. I'm working on the bill right now, and I'm working on it in a way that should not affect any revenue forecast that's been done to date. What I am trying to do with that bill is to say that anything that's already been factored into a revenue forecast in the way of nickel projects or TPA projects that aren't done, we could continue to pay the sales tax on those. But any new transportation package and new projects beyond that, we would not collect the sales tax on those. We would not pay sales tax on those. So it doesn't get into any impact on revenue forecasts. And as you've seen, revenue forecasts are still projected to go up over the next 2 biennia. We're looking at, and I'm constantly talking with not just transportation staff, but staff to some of our environmental committees to get a little better handle on what the difference is between our state regulations and the federal regulations. And let's look at maybe going to the federal regulations as a way to save money on our transportation projects. Limit the bond terms to 15 years instead of going out to 30 years. This will save us some money. It'll also let some of these bonds mature quicker. Then the existing revenue, the existing gas tax will start coming back into play much sooner. For the nickel and the TPA projects, we've gotten about 10 years, 12 years of projects out of them, but we're paying for 30 years. That means you've got 18 to 20 years that you continue to pay for those projects, but are getting no project anymore. Those projects are done, but you're just paying, and that money's not freed back up to do new projects. Some of the things that are maybe outside of true transportation reform that we're still saying that we need are changes to the Growth Management Act, enable us to get some projects into the rural areas, stop forcing our rural folks to have to go into the urban areas. We'll reduce some congestion without any additional cost, without having to raise any more taxes. We'll utilize the roads in the rural areas that are underutilized now. We'll get those people back to work or unemployed. And I mean, we've got plenty of infrastructure out there that we can use that will support growth. Permit decisions in 90 days. That's one thing that'll help us get people back to work. And there's a whole host of other things. I'm just going to kind of stop there and maybe answer specific questions.
Senator Becker, do you have anything you want to add?
Sure, thank you very much. Well, I'm chair of the Healthcare Committee, and for me that's the most exciting thing since whatever, but it's what I have found in the Healthcare Committee, and it's kind of a prelude to it from the last 2 years. We have things that we have to deal with this year, meaning the exchange, the cost of the exchange, and how we're going to fund that and make it self-sustainable by 2015. We also are looking at the Medicaid expansion, and the Medicaid expansion is a matter of taking a look at what we have in our services today, what we need to do to make sure that we are looking at all of the pieces so that we know when we decide to expand, that we've looked at it not just from the short-term perspective, but the long-term perspective. My goal when we're looking at this is that we have, like any business would, a checks and balance system in place so that if we start down the line with the Medicaid expansion and something's not working the way we thought, or it is working the way we thought, we can take a look at that, evaluate it, and then move forward with an even better product. The one thing that is critical to me is that I don't want to see us do is set up a system by just jumping in and not putting some rules and processes in place, that we create promises to the people out in our districts and our state, and then we can't keep that promise and down the line. Everybody talks about the federal government and what if they back out on some of their promises of what they will pay, and in 2015 we will be responsible for 10% of the Medicaid expansion. So that is something that we need to consider wholeheartedly. The one thing that I think is important too is that Governor Inslee has intimated that this expansion, the Medicaid expansion, would create 10,000 new jobs. Well, I'm on higher education as well, and we need to make sure that that we have a workforce ready to go for the 500,000 plus people coming into the expansion program. And so we've got workforce development. We have to make sure that we get those x-ray technicians, the pathologists, the doctors, the support staff, all to make sure that we can actually provide care to the patients.
Gary, you have anything you want to add before we take questions?
Sure. Well, I'm continuing along the same road I talked about last time. We're going to be producing fund education first budget. I think it'll be the first first operating budget that comes out of the process. But at that time, I'll be prepared to demonstrate what the impact on the balance of the budget is. And we will demonstrate that through a balance sheet and the impacts in terms of reforms and reductions that take place to accommodate the additional funding for the education requirements in the McCleary decision. But I'm more concerned right now with what's going on with the other Washington. To me, it's a precursor of where we may be at the end of 105 days. The place where the other Washington is right now is exactly where we were in this state before the Senate went to the ninth order. We were following along a tax increase package. That was the only solution. But as soon as that became an even playing field, and we sat down with the governor and all four caucuses, we could work out a budget solution that did not require new taxes, made significant reforms, took the right kind of reductions and the right kind of prioritization of government. That's the answer I want to see now. But basically, if we follow along that path right now, and our governor insists on new tax increases, then we will not reach, to me, a positive solution by the 105th day. So I'm keeping my eye on the other Washington. Hopefully they will move off of that one direction. The president will move off of that tax increase only proposal. They will come to some sort of a realization they have to balance their budget within existing resources and have to make a plan how to do that over the next few years. That's the same requirement we have. That's the path that I'm on right now, and hopefully that'll be the path that we end up in.
Okay, questions?
Senator Becker, I have a question just about, in light of the comments about the way that the Senate is sort of unrolling, how this is working, what's your observation about what happened last week in your committee when Senator Kaiser, I guess, pulled a parliamentary procedure and tried to force a vote on that diabetes-related bill? I guess my question is both on the tactic and then also just specific to that bill, what its status is, especially in light of the fact it did have bipartisan.
Well, that was an interesting situation, and as you know, that happened in 3 committees. It wasn't just in my committee. And parliamentarily, we did it correct in going to recess. We got the correct information as to what we should do moving forward. And we ended up actually letting everybody talk about that bill. And then we took a vote, and we voted that bill down. Now, just a little background on that entire day of doing executive order on a number of bills is both caucuses the night before had gone to a mini caucus, and the staff came in and briefed each other on it. And in that mini caucus of our majority coalition caucus, we actually said that we didn't support 4 of the bills that we had lined up for executive session. 2 of those were my bills. One was a Senator Kaiser bill, and one was the Senator Schlicker bill on diabetes. And there was determined, and a lot of member comments back and forth about, is this a fluff bill? Is it a bill that actually has value and does something strong for the state? And that's how we looked at every bill, and that's why we decided not to vote for that.
And does this hurt the trust level based on the fact that that happened on the part of the minority party? I mean, this is specific to the Senate, so.
Yeah.
So I think it makes us more cautious, but of what may come in the future. But it's been really nice because up until that point, I've met with Senator Kaiser on a weekly basis. I've met with or Representative Cody on a weekly basis. We've had my vice chair, Senator Dan Meyer, in, and staff members. So we've been talking everything through and trying to be very honest and open and direct. And we've not paid attention to, at least from my perspective, and if you look at the bills that were actually heard, we did not have a D or a majority coalition caucus agenda. We heard everything pretty much.
Will you hear the reproductive parity act bill in your committee when it comes over?
Yes.
I do think, though, the Senate Minority Caucus is learning what it's like to be in the minority. You know, from my perspective, I've been reading Facebook posts about how hard this is on them. You know, you've had one-party control in this state for 10 years, and, you know, now you don't get your way and that you're going to pout on Facebook or run parliamentary or procedures and committees when you just need to learn to give up the credit on a bill and work for solutions. That's what happens when you're in the minority. You have to be a caucus of ideas, and you can't worry about who the prime sponsor of a bill is. You have to put the right idea forward. So they just got some learning to do. It's growing pains, I'm sure.
Representative Bolt, we see the news of these problems on building the 520 bridge. They're now running up against their contingency fund. If they need more money on this project, where should that money come from?
So, you know, it's interesting because you bring this up. Because we engineered those pontoons through our own state, we don't have a liability that we can go back on to the people that did this. I mean, so we've done this to ourselves without a check and balance. It's a big problem. So what are we going to do on this? Well, we probably need to, one, do a breakdown analysis of why we ended up in the place we were in the first place. How did we end up sub-engineering pontoons that are supposed to carry cars across? How we wound up with the liability that we have no warranty or any way to go after the contractor that built them because our own engineers sub-designed them. So to answer your question, I think right now we have to really take the whole project apart, look at where it failed, and then come up with an answer that at least if we do move forward again in the future, that it won't fail again in the future, and that it's engineered properly and that the liability is properly placed.
Are you willing to approve higher tolls or shifting money in other places if they do blow through the contingency and actually need more money to complete it?
No, not until they learn to do it right. Until Washington State, until we have some kind of confidence around DOT's ability to do the project correctly, then I don't think we can continue throwing good money after bad and making this a more cost prohibitive project than it already is. And you see the Mercer Island residents are already in an uproar, and then they want to toll 90 to pay for it, and you're driving congestion to one road and the other road barely floats. So it's a huge issue right now.
Do you want to see maybe a special legislative hearing or investigation on this?
So I've talked to the state auditor about it, and we actually are part of our caucus efficiencies are to dive into looking at the inefficiencies and some of the problems we think in the administration of DOT that we have to have answers. Our whole premise is we have to fix DOT before we can fund DOT.
And what about the people who were involved in this? Should they lose their jobs?
Once we do a breakdown, if we had substandard engineering and you built a product that you know is substandard, of course.
Well, I might add to that. One thing that a large organization does is when there's a screw up, they have a lessons learned session. They take a very hard look, and no one's hides from this. You take a look at it, but before you get into a situation like that, you have a risk analysis. And I don't think DOT does a good job of risk analysis. In this case especially, the downside of having all the liability should not rest with the state. It should rest with the contractor, and that is all part of the bidding process, so a contractor can assume that risk.
It's a big part of the contracting process.
And there are some of the best engineers in the world have built pontoon bridges in other countries. We didn't go and get several looks at this. We didn't look at other bids. We just decided that we could handle this in-house with our process, and that's a flawed logic.
What do you want to see Governor Inslee do?
I would like him to investigate. I'd like him to be able to turn and say, yes, this won't happen again. Here's the analysis, here's the risk management. But this isn't the only problem we have. I mean, Ed, you want to talk about some of the other issues?
Well, some of the problems with the 520 as far as the potential conflict of interest with the contract being silent on what what our liability is to the general contractor if those pontoons are delivered late. We know what the penalty is if they deliver late. We don't know what the penalty is going to be on DOT if the late delivery of the pontoon delays the general contractor. I've got 8 document boxes in my office, plus 2, I think 4 and 6 inch binders that are all about this whole pontoon contract. And yet the contract is silent on what the liability on DOT is going to be. And so I'm really concerned about that. We've got issues with ferries and the way what our policies are about constructing ferries.
If I may interrupt you, I just want to be sure I understand you. You're saying that if DOT's mistakes lead to those pontoons being delivered late to the general contractor, that
No.
taxpayers are on the hook to pay the general contractor?
Yeah, if we're delaying, we could be very much on the hook for delaying the general contractor. I'm actually going back to before we learned this. I've been asking some questions on the 520, and what the project manager told me in my office was that for every day the pontoons are late being delivered, then there is a $5,000 per pontoon per day penalty against the provider of those pontoons, and they're delivered in groups of 6. So it's $30,000 per day. But if the delay of those pontoons results in a delay to the general contractor, we don't know what DOT's liability to the general contractor is going to be. And one of the big concerns there is the contractor providing the pontoons and the general contractor are affiliated. And so we don't know, there's no protection for the taxpayer on the back end of this.
Do you guys believe that Secretary Inslee's new pick for transportation is a good one and will be able to fix these kinds of problems?
We're going to give them a chance. It's got to go through Senate confirmation, so that's a whole nother question. I'm hoping a fresh face and an opportunity to reform an organization that would, over-order ferry engines and they sit in the warehouses without any boats to put them in, that build substandard roads. This organization needs new guidance and new leadership, so it needs to be overhauled, so I'm hoping this person tackles it. They're very transit heavy, I understand that in their experiences, but if they can still build and benefit our state, then we're hopeful. But right now, I have not met with them.
So does this affect at all your view on the transportation package, whether any money at all this year should go to WashDOT?
Yeah, it does. So here's my thing is the voters send us here with the confidence that we're the shepherds of their pennies. Okay, so you're looking at a 10-cent gas tax increase, and you're going to take gas tax in a total package of 67 cents a gallon. You're going to basically make it harder on working families to pay the bills, and you're giving their hard-earned money to an organization that isn't necessarily spending the money correctly. So not only are we as a state impacting them through government regulations and GMA that makes them drive farther and farther to work, and we're going to make them pay more and more, but the money that they're paying more and more of their hard-earned dollars is going into substandard ferries and substandard construction, into construction projects that are 100% more expensive than in other states, and that have larger mitigations than the federal government requires. Why are we taking their money and wasting it? And until I can get past that, then I have to say no.
What about the senators on the reaction to the House transportation package, 10-cent gas tax, and some of these others do that?
Well, sure. I think the very first thing that comes to mind is there are 0 reforms, 0 cost-saving measures. We understand the need to fund transportation, but for the public to have confidence in government, they have to see something different than the 520 bridge or the Columbia River Crossing Bridge for us to be able to go forward.
All of the change orders early on in the Alaska Way Viaduct project, I mean, that really has eroded the confidence of the taxpayers out there that DOT can manage these projects properly.
And you asked about, I just want to finish on the package. It is very heavy on MVET, and the voters have in the past just totally rejected a high MVET. If you have a $20,000 car, you're looking at $140,000 or $140 a year for your tabs, Plus, King and Pierce counties, and I think Snohomish, want to add that, double that as well. So you're looking at $280 on a $20,000 car each year. And there's no guarantee that that MVET money will go for concrete and asphalt.
So what would you, what alternative would you push for, or just a smaller package?
Well, I agree that we have to really get the voters' confidence, because I don't think that there's any way we could get a package out of here with 2/3 of the vote.
So one of the interesting things is we have teletown halls now. So I know you guys are aware of these things. And they did a poll on a recent teletown hall, several of them, and it was almost 92% of the people were opposed to a gas tax under the current situation that we're in. People know they have to drive, they know they have to go through these, but until they have confidence that their money's being spent correctly, I don't think we should do that. And look at any business in the state of Washington that can't budget and bond a project according to life cycle maintenance practices. When you have a 15-year life cycle maintenance and you're bonding a project for 30 years and you have no money to pay for your maintenance, how can you expect any different result than we're having today? So it's a systemic change that has to happen.
But previous tax packages for transportation passed with 2/3 votes in the support of many Republicans. Don't you guys own responsibility for this just as much as whoever else you're?
So some of those people aren't here anymore, and some of them are. But I would tell you that I didn't support those packages because we didn't have the reforms in the 9 cent. I was not the leader at the time, so I can't really comment to that. I would have liked to have seen more. The nickel package had some reforms tied to it, which I thought were a good first step.
Do you run the risk of having a ferry equivalent and a 520 bridge equivalent of the bridge to nowhere if you don't do a package? Essentially, they're in trouble, but if you cut off the revenue stream, you still have substandard ferries, and you essentially got a bunch of pilings in the middle of Lake Washington that are nothing but scenery.
Well, those are TPA projects, so they're already funded. We're not cutting the current taxes, their current law taxes. We're saying that before we add any more taxes, we've got to fix the problems that we're seeing with the ferries, the 520, the Alaska Way Viaduct, the problems with the way the Columbia River crossing has been handled, and a whole host of other areas that are problematic with the way DOT operates. We heard testimony in the House Transportation Committee on February 18th that some of our projects are costing 1.5 times what similar projects in similar areas of other states are costing. The Alaska Way Viaduct, the estimate of the cost, they're saying that per lane mile it's equivalent to the Big Dig and 2.5 times what the cost is for similar projects in other states in urban areas. Other projects, it was double. Consistently, the testimony was that we are consistently higher on similar projects than every other state in the nation. Every other state in the nation. And if we were doing things right, sometimes we'd be higher, sometimes somebody else would be higher. But we're higher every single time. There's a problem, it needs to be fixed, and if we just give more money now and don't get the fixes, it's not going to get fixed.
So we have a great chance with a new governor, a new secretary, we have all these new transportation people to fix it, right?
Let's fix it.
Well, I am just wondering, after all the concerns that you guys are outlining here, is 2013 the year for a transportation package?
I think if people get really serious about the reforms and they realize that some parts of it are inevitably headed to the ballot, it's not out of the question. But they have to get serious very soon and understand that reforms first, and that you have to be very serious about the fact that if you run an MVET package, there'll probably be an initiative or referendum anyway.
Senator, to follow up with you, you mentioned having to confirm the new transportation secretary.
Mm-hmm.
How much of those confirmation hearings are going to be focused on things like 520, where we see some very expensive trouble?
Well, I think those questions have to come up, and I'm sure we have co-chairs in the Senate, and I think that Senator Ides is going to have real questions, and I'm certain that Senator King will have real questions. because we want someone that the entire Transportation Committee can feel comfortable with managing their tax dollars.
What sort of questions do you want to see answered?
Well, how do we reduce costs? How do we prevent the boondoggles of these pontoons? Those are excellent questions to ask. What are we going to do about long-term bonds for short-term projects? I think that we have a very talented committee in the Senate. For example, Senator Sheldon's on the committee. He's going to ask great questions. And you'll see those questions coming from our co-chairs and the members alike.
One thing I'll add is that, I've been here for a while. Every governor has wanted to have transportation as a state agency. And Governor Gregoire was successful with that in the legislature. So transportation is a state agency. It's no longer managed by a commission, which might have a diverse group on the commission of 7 or 8 people, which have varied experience in the private sector. This is a different situation, and now a new governor has the control of that state agency. And it's important that the governor work with the legislature on that, as they do in other issues as well. So I personally liked it when it was a commission. The governor appointed those members, but they were confirmed as well. But they have a diverse makeup.
This is all very conversational about the concerns you have. Will we be seeing something as explicit and defined as a package of specific reforms that you want to, when will we see that?
So, Brad, we were actually going to talk to you guys about that. We are ready in the House. We have been working on it for the last couple of weeks. We were hoping to roll something out to you guys on Monday, and if not, if you guys are interested in seeing them. Right now, it depends on what your desire is, because we have our 5 major reforms we want. You've heard them time and time again, right? And then we have probably, how many bills, Ed, do you have underneath this thing?
I can provide you just about as many bills as you want to address some of these things.
So we can give you as much detail as you want on this one. This one's, we've got plenty of detail behind it. So we were thinking Monday, if you guys want to come in and have a conversation around it and show that and highlight that, and we'd have some members from Transportation Committee in to talk about it.
Do you have bipartisan support for this package yet?
We haven't. We're in a different position over here maybe than the Senate is. Right now, the majority caucus is pushing a 10-cent a gallon gas tax without reforms, that's pretty transit heavy and doesn't do anything about tolls. They're all locked up on that, and they're rolling with that. We are in committee. We've heard positive things about everything. Everybody thinks that the things we need to do need to be worked on later. And so we'd like to see them worked on now.
So when's the Senate going to unveil its transportation, either package or reform plan?
It's a work in progress, John. I mean, we're looking at ideas of our own, and I know that they're taking a look at the best ideas of the House and putting them together. It's interesting. Wasn't there a scheduled hearing on the revenue package that was canceled?
Yeah.
So if they can't even have a hearing on it in the House, it's really difficult to gauge a lot of support, isn't it?
Okay, but 2 things. One, when do you think you'll have your package out? And can you outline some major things that you want to put in the package? Essentially, House has its package, you don't like it.
You like ours?
When's your package going to be out?
John, I don't have a hard date on that. Honesty is the only answer I have to that one.
Okay. What sort of things do you want to put into
Brad?
Yeah, Mark, you mentioned there are good ideas, plural, in the House.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you mention what you consider good ideas in the House?
Let me put it this way.
You implied there's more than one.
Well, in the reforms, they're going to have 5 or 10. Even Republicans only agree 80% of the time. Democrats probably only agree 80% of the time. So we're going to look at the ideas that we like the best, and I'm certain we're probably going to agree on 80%. Maybe have some questions or differences on others. And our members will be looking for their own as well. And they'll be looking in all corners.
CR? Hold on, CR's next, and then...
I just want to follow up on 520, the contractor thing. You talked about why isn't the contractor taking on this liability? That obviously comes with a cost, and my understanding was the whole point of the state doing it was it saved $180 million, something like that. So we took on the risk this is the outcome, but.
But CR, one of the things we didn't do that was supposed to be done is there's supposed to be some benchmarking to see if we had the technical experience to do that. And that's what we're trying to figure out right now, where that gap came in. Why did we choose to engineer and take the liability on something that we didn't have the expertise to do? And would it have been cost effective if you'd actually looked at the long-term liability of this? If somebody was taking a real look at it and using benchmarks against other projects and other firms, if we got a guaranteed rate, sometimes you have to look at your liability versus your guaranteed rate before you move forward. And I don't think we did that.
So are you saying in the Senate that without a reform package passing, you won't pass any kind of...
I think that getting the votes in the Senate is extremely difficult if there's not believable reforms. I think that we are interested in transportation, but just throwing more money at it is not the solution to transportation or education. You know, we're going to argue about how much money we need for transportation, how much money we put into McClary. But if we don't have any reforms, there's no expectation the results are going to be any better than they were before.
Okay, I'm trying to pin you down. You keep talking about reforms, but you don't have any specifics.
I have tons. I have 3 pages. Come on Monday, we will roll them out for you. And you can ask all the questions, John. I'll even give you special time. And we will get through the whole entire thing. Yes, sir, behind you.
Sorry to interrupt, but little changes over to Hanford.
Yes.
Yeah. Governor been dealing with that appropriately? Anything that you could do differently?
You know, I met with the governor this morning along with Senator Tom, and he's working very hard to keep the VIP plant going and cleaning those tanks up. We support the governor. I mean, my district is right across the river from there. Expediting the cleanup at Hanford is a federal issue, and they should darn well get after it. And we're going to support the governor on that.
What about the governor's climate change bill? It looks like Senate Energy made some changes, took away his ability to select the person doing the study, and made him a non-voting member. What's the thinking there?
Well, they agreed the governor should have his package. They moved it out. There was changes to the intent section. It's simply a work in progress, Brad. If we didn't like it or didn't have any, we'd have just said no. But we didn't say no. People worked it. Intent sections are part of legislation, how you structure it. It's got a long journey ahead of it, but it is moving. People say we didn't move bills. Well, that bill came at the latest possible date. I mean, in order to stick with the 5-day rule, we had to schedule it the minute it hit the ground and move it. We were given a minimum amount of time, and we cooperated with the governor in getting it out.
Do you not trust him to pick a reliable route to study?
I read his book, and he seems a little biased, maybe. Well, never mind. Read the book. I don't want a spoiler alert. The butler did it. I don't want to go there.
When might we see the education first budget that you're going to roll out?
I'm thinking probably within a week to 10 days. Pretty much I was waiting for the most recent caseload information. Have a preliminary number, but we'll firm that number up in the next week or so, and then they're ready to release it.
Sure. Let's see, what are the prospects for the Don't Buy Before Need bill, the Initiative 937 bill, both in the Senate and the House?
We're counting. I think you'll probably see it come out of rules pretty soon, and then we'll start doing a vote count to see where we're at. I think there's bipartisan support for the bill. Some will have concerns, but we'll take a hard look at it.
Okay, and how about in the House? One of the issues there, of course, is that the House Environment Chairman says that he's not going to go to a hearing.
Right. Well, that's the problem when you have a coalition government. You seem to get more heard. When you have a one-party control, you don't. So I can't influence that right now. We have other bills that we're trying to get through the committee as well.
If you look at our Senate Environment and Energy Committee, we move Maryland Chase bills, we move 937 bills, we move Ranker bills, we move governor's bills. I mean, a whole wide range of bills moved and were heard in that committee. That's the difference between the way the coalition works in the Senate and the way the House works under their system.
I'll give you an example. This morning, before we had action on the floor, we had passed The coalition had passed 40 bills out of the Senate. The minority party had passed 16. The person who's passed the most bills is Holmquist Newbury with 4, and I think Padden out of a Law and Justice Committee had passed 4. But over on the minority side, Rolfus has passed 2, Mullet 2, Kaiser 2, Hobbs 2, and many people have passed at least a bill so far. And it's still early. It's still early, and you passed one Republican bill.
One Republican bill today, so I feel good.
So 16 out of 40?
No, 40 and 16, so 56 total bills. Minority Coalition caucus with members with 40, minority caucus with 60.
And that's been updated since.
Today we passed one Republican bill. I think we did 10 bills.
And actually, Austin, that's changed a little bit. The last order of consideration, 2 of the 3 bills were from the minority caucus. I think 1 or 2 out of the 5 on the prior order of consideration were. So we've been moving their bills, I think, and our goal is to continue to move their bills.
Last question?
Thank you.
Coach Pete Carroll is here today, and he was talking about he has an idea for funding youth programs to keep them out of trouble. Is that a realistic thing at this point, funding that kind of project?
His idea is actually not. It's actually a very good one, because what he's done in the basic concept of it is what United Ways have tried to do in the past and other organizations have done in the past. When you take all the organizations in a community that are trying to tackle one problem and you put them in a room and you find out what the duplication of services is, and then you find out who's doing what best, and you're able to streamline that and make the dollars more productive, that's a fantastic vision and goal. He's not looking for a ton from us. He just wants us to buy into his project and his streamlining ideas. I think he really has the best interest of bringing Washington together. There's some real hard work that needs to be done in Yakima and Spokane and Tacoma. And to help these organizations not duplicate services, to show what works well and what doesn't work well, and to have somebody who's willing to champion that's fantastic. So we appreciate him coming up today.
Okay, well, thank you, gentlemen.